Right, so it's 3 p.m. We are all set to begin with another exciting session on connecting the dots. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Several studies have shown employee productivity can be increased by understanding employees' flexibility. Also, in the past few months, studies have also shown productivity while working remotely from home is better than working in an office setting. On average, those who work from home spend 10 times less a day being unproductive, work one more day a week, and are 47% more productive. Join us and be part of this very interesting session where our panelists will be sharing their insights and experience on how leaders can work towards enhancing employee productivity. HRAI welcomes you all to the session on connecting the dots, employee productivity, workaholism, flexible working hours, work from home. To know more about HRAI and its events, I would request all our participants to visit the link details posted in the chat window. It would be great to have all the participants' feedback. We will be running a poll before the Q&A session, requesting all participants to kindly give your feedback on the session. I now take the privilege to introduce our esteemed panel members for our today's webinar. Mr. Prashil Parde, Chief People Officer, Trantor Software Private Limited, a seasoned HR professional with 19 plus years of fast track MNC HR experience covering India, APAC, and US geographies. Born and brought up in Mumbai, studied at Bombay Scottish School, enriched by education from leading management institutes, NMIMS, a coaching and mentoring degree from ISB under Marshall Goldsmith, and a certificate program in design thinking from MIT Sloan Boston. He has been a various HR leadership roles for companies like Tata Interactive Systems, Birla Technologies, Aeon Hewitt, where his last role was as a global talent program head at Chicago. Thereafter, he came to India and worked with organizations like Reliance Life Science, Times of India, leading talent management at HCL Technologies in Boston, Noida, and Chennai. And currently, he is a CPO with Trantor Software Private Limited. You can also follow him on LinkedIn. Details for the same are mentioned in the chat window. Our next panel member, Mr. Sahil Nair, Senior Associate Director, Kpmg, an experienced HR professional whose forte is building an employer brand that helps attract and leverage relevant talent. Mondays through Fridays are about driving the entire employee life cycle with exposure to the finer nuances of human resources and its functioning in a growing and evolving organization. He is also a visiting faculty at business schools like IIM and IIT. You can also follow him on LinkedIn. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Mr. Vinay Trivedi, Global Head HR and Admin, Therapy. He comes with over 14 years of experience in the field of talent management, talent engagement, and talent acquisition across IT, ITES, banking, insurance, and fintech sector. Experienced in managing entire gamut of HR, creating smart acquisition strategy, creating people engagement journey, managing performance, drawing up the learning journey, managing HR compliance, payroll, statutory requirements, creating great place to work. You can also follow him on LinkedIn. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Now I'll introduce our panel cum moderator for today's session, Ms. Sindhu Kalyan Sundaram, founder Ignite Academy and Server Happiness. Sindhu brings enriched experience in organizational development and management consulting. Her experience spans across retail, banking, and financial services, loyalty marketing, FMCG, IT services, agriculture, manufacturing, engineering, etc. Having worked across India and the United Kingdom with GE, Nestle, Infosys, Cognizant, New Look Retailers, Affinion International, she is the founder of Ignite Academy and Server Happiness. She helps organizations enable enhance employee happiness levels as well effectiveness. She has worked with global audience and cultures. She holds a postgraduate degree in marketing and information technology from SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. You can also follow her on LinkedIn. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. I hereby hand over the platform to Miss Sindhu. Over to you, Sindhu.
Thank you, Faisal. I remember that the silence was loud, literally loud, that we could actually hear the stirring of coffee in the nearby table. I was seated in the most bustling cafe in the city, but to my utter surprise, it was almost empty. Cut back 18 months, and I could actually see a lot of people, different cohorts, one particular cohort of students who were attending their online classes. On the other side, we had employees attending their Zoom meetings, their team meetings, a few people on conference calls, a few entrepreneurs having business meets. But today, the scenario was different, and the entire cafe was silent. And that's when someone nearby mentioned, it looks like companies are calling back employees. And maybe they're happy, maybe they're not happy. Good afternoon, and I welcome all of you to another very interesting discussion on employee productivity. Like I mentioned earlier, the last time we spoke about, we were talking about navigating this turbulence, but today we're talking about how we navigate to a normal, which was normal, but which today is new normal. I have the same question to all the three panelists today, with companies embracing their employees, welcoming them back home, or home in the sense the workplace. Vinay, what changes are you noticing, or what challenges are you noticing in bringing your employees back to the workplace?
You know, these are challenges that you typically face when you make New Year resolutions. Very excited to make them, but very hard to follow. So everybody's going through a churn. So people, when we did not have office, people were waiting for us to get back to office. Now that when we are calling people back to office, they're thinking, can we work from home for a few more days? So it's a part of change management. So there is definitely excitement, anxiety, irritation because of some schedules that people have started following that needs to change when they come to office in physical form. So I think overall the mood is definitely happy for us to get back to work, and not so happy for a lot of people who are moonlighting.
Thank you, Vinay. I think you said that with a very objective expression. I would like to hear more from you. Over to you, Sahil. What changes are you noticing at the workplace as employees are getting back?
I think let's pick up the analogy of what Vinay said, which is so beautiful, right? New Year resolution, and let me take the example of hitting the gym. Like we've heard of Newton's law of inertia, a classic case, right? We've all been at home. We've got so used to our pajamas that as long as the upper torso looks fine, you're great on a call. But internally, you do know that you've been eating a lot and your paunch is actually coming out. So there are some people who want to really go back and go back to the workplace, go back to the gym and do the weights. And there are others who are absolutely comfortable binging, Netflix, having more pizzas and more Coke. I think the fundamental challenge that a lot of organizations are going to face is, how do you allow binge watching at the workplace? How do you allow people to not just wear formals, but even come in shorts? If it is absolutely fine, if you're not going to be interacting with clients and it's just the workplace. And therefore, does workplace become ancillary to work? And I think fundamentally, if we break those barriers to say, you have to be suited, booted if you get to work, versus saying you can walk into work with your pajamas, you can have a 1 hour afternoon break where everyone gets into a place and watches a nice series. And at the same time, you can drop in and drop by whenever you want. There's no punch in, punch out. And if you want to spend 3 hours at work because you want to catch up with people and just have fun and then do some work and collaborate, and then your individual task you can come back home and do. And I think if we just measure output and not measure policy, I think we will create a wonderful workplace, whether it is at home or whether it is at work.
Thank you, Sahil. You're actually talking about a whole new reality that organizations are forced to confront. We'll hear about that more from you. Over to you, Prasheel. What changes are organizations facing as employees get back to work today? You are on mute, Prasheel.
Oh, okay. The question is, are employees really want to get back to work? Are they getting back to work fully, partly? Are they comfortable with what they're doing currently? So what Vinay said, New Year resolution, and what Sahil said, Sahil, you gave a completely new hybrid model to be thought through. Okay. Uh, but when we are talking about the industry that we are currently, the IT industry, at the end of the day, one of the best thing that the DNA of this industry is that all of them are self-propelled. Most of the employees are self-propelled, whether to get the work done or whether to build in shortcuts. Okay, whether to write a code or whether to go ahead and do a review. I don't think so. Not many, according to me, not many things will change. The work, the delivery, which is the backbone, is still going to remain the same. As usual, orientations, belief, thought process, and other add-on responsibilities like taking care of the child and making tea at 4 o'clock yourself, and picking up your son from school. Those are the things that you will have to fit into this. But employees are thankful that the travel time to the office is reduced, but they're now kind to make a decision whether to get the maidservant back to pick up your son from school or whether to really do it yourself. So currently the chaos is that half of them want to come back. I mean, fortunately, 2 weeks ago, there was an electricity surge in one of my development center, and not about 100 people said we want to come back to work because they wanted to get the work done. So yes, I'm a believer in human honesty and belief, and they want to get back to work. But whether they sit at home, they still do the work. So the change is the trust of the organization towards the employee. I think so. It starts from there, and then the employees knowing how much your manager and the organization trusts you and how they react to it. So I think so. That's the basic change that is happening. Organizations are wanting to get, and the owners are getting into the owners or the leaders of the organizations are getting into herd mentality of calling everybody back to work. And the employees, one half say, no, I don't want to go back to work. I'll rather pick up my son from school. And the other half says, no, I might as well get back to work so that I can have some sanity in life. So that paradigm or that chaos is still going to exist, but not much change according to me.
Thank you, Prashil. I think you basically summarized the entire discussion in advance. See, one of the main points of discussion over the last 2 years has been how organizations are retaining their culture, because one of the tests of crisis is how strong is the organization culture and how strong are the values. Are they just lip service or are they actually being carried out? Vinay, my question to you is, we had discussions about organization cultures, and we saw organizations adapting the culture over the last 2 years, and now again it's kind of shaken or probably evolving. How are organizations retaining their culture today?
So I think I have a very alternate view here. I don't think organizations really adopted to any remote culture. I think organizations were really pushed to do so. I remember having conversations in 2019 or 2020 when I would push my folks saying that, can you do an online interview of the candidate? They would say, nahi yaar, mil lete hai, thoda mil ke body language samajh mein aa jayega, right? But organizations were really pushed into sort of doing this. And if you remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, HR was busy sending rules saying log in at 9 o'clock. Please make sure that you're available. Please reply to the messenger. Please don't be away more than 10 minutes. Take your breaks, blah, 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 blah. Come second wave, organizations, because everybody had COVID in their own backyards, they said, okay, please take care, be a little easy on yourself. We understand the stress, etc., etc. Now that everything is coming back to normalcy, they're like, now let's go back to office, right? There are two key challenges when we talk of culture, right? I'm sitting in a house, which is a 2-bedroom apartment. I have my wife working in one room. I'm working in one room, kids doing school in the hall, and grandparents just don't know what to do, right? What culture are you talking about? There's a real challenge that exists for a lot of people who want to get back to work because of this. So I think organizations managed to stay afloat and did that brilliantly in the last 2 years. But a workplace is a workplace. Like you have Swiggy's that has replaced us going to restaurants, but that cannot beat the experience of going and dining out once a week. Similarly, workplace, has to be at an outside location apart from your house, which is also reality. So I think culture will retain, will evolve. It's like water, right? I mean, it'll fit in and it'll move. So that's the way it is.
I like the usage of water analogy. I keep using that, but it's great that you said organizations are keeping the culture afloat. Now, beneath the culture, you've got various parameters. For example, how engaged employees are, how productive employees are. I do remember during the early days of my career, one day when I was leaving office, when I was leaving home at around 7:30 p.m., one of the managers came up and asked me, Sindhu, are you working half a day? Probably that's how he measured employee productivity at that time. But again, over the past couple of years, the concept of productivity has changed. The concept of how are we going to measure KPIs, how are we going to measure if an employee is actually being productive has changed. Sahil, my question to you is the concept of productivity the same? Or now that employees are getting back to work, is HR or other managers going to relook at what productivity means to them?
I think, Sindhu, before I come to your question on productivity, I think let's spend a couple of minutes on culture, because when I left, I think there is a lot more that can be scraped on the surface. I think culture is the most abused word that I think many of us latch on to, for the lack of a better word. Okay. Anything that we don't understand, we put it as culture. That's one. Number two, culture is a very fuzzy word. So therefore, it is very difficult for many of us to even define what culture is. But for me, being a believer of basics, I think culture is everyday behavior. Very simple. Culture is everyday behavior. Now, whether you do this at office or you do this at home, your employees are the same, behaviors have changed. Now, the reality is, are we using the same benchmarks of what we would accept as okay in office and not okay at home? When people were in office, people used to take 1-hour lunch breaks. People used to go down for sutta breaks 4 times a day. People used to go and hang out with people in and around office and have corridor conversations and water cooler conversations and gossip conversations. Does that mean that we would reprimand them? Our answer was no. Right now, if people are exercising flexibility in their work schedules, the question is, why are we going after them? And therefore, the question is, what are we measuring as the output? Or are we measuring the input? So I think the metric needs to clearly get defined. And therefore, what is becoming very difficult in this whole culture conversation is to say, am I looking at behaviors with the added lens of flexibility? And if we are not, then the question is, are we a listening organization? Because today the whole world is saying, I want flexibility, because we've got used to it. With this context, let me come to your question on productivity. I think fundamentally, there have been many cases pre-pandemic as well, where organizations have been very lenient on dealing with underperformance. And that has actually set a wrong precedent. And today, if people are pulling levers on performance, I don't think it's wrong. But at the same time, it is extremely important to realize that in this entire paradigm, are we as HR, who are custodians of policy, of process, of culture, are we drawing a consistent approach? Or are we just saying that, oh, this business leader said this guy is not working, please terminate him, please fire him? Or are we going back and saying, okay, let's look at the metrics. You're talking about asking this guy to leave, but there are 25 other people who have performance on defined metrics who are worse than this person. And therefore, what are we doing about them? And I think unless we don't stir the coffee in this direction, you may say water moves into the shape of the bottle, but at the end of the day, the density of the liquid determines how the liquid will behave.
I can't stop smiling now, but thank you very much. You spoke about productivity. I think that was very candid when you said we have to relook at what exactly are we measuring. That leads me to the next question, because employees were used to their metrics being measured in a particular manner, time and again, filling in timesheets, filling in performance appraisal forms during a particular time of the year. And then over the last 2 years, they changed. There was immense fear as well as to how are my peers doing when I'm not able to see my own leader, or I'm not being more visible to my manager. So, Prashil, question to you is, in such cases, how are organizations making an effort to build trust amongst the employees?
Yes, organizations started in various different ways. Not only me, but overall, when you are in this industry, you tend to know. They started the yoga classes, they started the advisory classes, every Friday classes, meet and have lunch together, dinner together. On a lighter note, these things make sense, but when the rubber hits the road, the only pantheon that speaks about is how much was the task delivered, and how was the relationship between managers and the employee measured, and what kind of trust each of them have between themselves. So who will stand for the other? So probably the old methods of loyalty and integrity, the concepts we evolved when we were studying in our MBA programs, are the ones which are really coming up right now. Most of the managers and most of the employees are only connecting with each other over the phone, over the Google Meets or Zoom meetings. They see only the torso of the person. Probably out of 200 meetings done in a month, for only 10 meetings, they see the torso of the person. Other meetings, either the employee hasn't put up the makeup, or he's not in a good, or the manager is not in the best place to put up the thing. But the fealty in the voice, getting that extra hours done and delivering what the manager wants or what the employee wants, doing those finer closures on a PPT that you make, of writing the numbers and seeing to it that the presentation is done. Believe you me, when we worked in the office, things were simpler. Conversation was easier. We barely used phones but walked up to a person. Now I have my team members sitting in Poland and in Costa Rica and in the US, but we still get work done. The loyalty, the trust, the understanding of the concept are apart from our verbal communication, our written communication has improved, the timelines have improved. So in order to get to that level, what is really happening is the workaholism and the time taken has increased. Earlier, we knew 9 hours a day in the office with half an hour of sutta break and half an hour of lunch break, we would still get things done. And our delivery timeline, we knew that we'll get it done in 3 days. Now it has increased. And are organizations doing something for it? Probably most of them are trying to limit the hours or trying to give the skills to the people to talk better and to be more sensitive to each other. But at the end of the day, the customer wants certain things to be delivered within 4 days. and people are extending themselves under the banner of loyalty, under the banner of fealty, under the banner of better work done, and extending their hours from 8 hours to 13 hours or 14 hours a day. And well, there is an effect that is happening, and families are getting upset. Like when I said his wife sits in the other room and he's in one room and they're working out and Swiggy is being called. Even sitting at home, you are not having a cuddlity of family, primarily because of workaholism. And each and every one of us is really stretching out to get the work done. And not many organizations have any magic rule to solve it. At one end, you have productivity, but you need to go extra hours to understand even the concept that would have been done over the desk and the table. So it's a challenging scenario. I'm probably I spoke off the grid a bit, but the reality of this is each one of us is facing through the battle today. And it's probably it's not workaholism, but understanding the value and the weight of work is the basic challenge that is happening today.
I think you delved into the profundity of that situation, especially when you spoke about concepts, or I would say finer values like loyalty or sensitivity, honesty that lead towards building trust. So before I go ahead, I want to just open it up to the other two panelists, Vinay and Sahil. Would you like to contribute on this trust building topic? Who wants to go? Yeah.
Both of them are smiling.
When you want to go first, I'll try.
Go fast, I'm missing my Netflix.
This whole trust is another facade that I tell you people are creating, right? The problem really is we like to use these big terms and we want to say, oh, trust and compassion and we care and all of that. You behave with another person like a human being, everything else will fall in place. As far as organizations are concerned, there are about 10% of them that are proactive and early adopters. There are about 70% that is the Aam Janta, Mango people like you and me, who are doing their business without any issues. And there's always this 20% mischief mongers that creates all the issue. And all of this facade is for the 20% of the people, forgetting that there are a good lot of 80% that are doing their jobs properly, right? All rules, regulations, etc., is because this 20% is creating more noise. The minute you understand that, I think automatically half your problems are gone. As far as trust is concerned, I think as human beings, we've been far less trusting of our peoples before the pandemic. I think pandemic was a great leveler because you didn't have an option. You had to trust people. You didn't have an option, so you didn't see somebody in office, but you still got work done. So yeah, I think it's more of a facade. I think if you treat them as human beings, automatically you'll trust. That's my only sense.
Thank you, Vinay. Sahil, would you like to add?
Sure. I think we've heard two very different views. Maybe I'll add a third dimension. I think many of us have heard of the trust equation. And I think that equation works so beautifully, right? So on the numerator, you have CRI. In the denominator, you have S. What are the full forms, right? Just look at this. It's a simple mathematical equation. And if you apply it to our daily lives, it plays out just so beautifully. C stands for credibility, R for reliability, I for intimacy. So C plus R plus I is your numerator and self-orientation is your denominator. Now come to think of this, if you actually break this down and start with the entire hiring process, everybody who was hired through the pandemic has been hired remotely. On what basis have we hired people? We've hired people either through references, through our employees, people who we know. Many positions have got closed through known contacts, and therefore the credibility aspect gets taken care of. Reliability, of course, you look at past records, you do a great interview, all of that. What is significantly missing which is the numerator, which actually decides the relationship and the equation of trust, which is intimacy. And because intimacy is low and self-orientation is high, it is a byproduct whereby trust will be challenged and questioned for very, very simple reasons that today man, and I'm including all genders, but man is a creature to say, I want to make my presence felt. I've joined a new organization. I'm working from home. And if you look at this trend, right, a lot of people who've joined through the pandemic love to come on video because they want the others to know them. They want to get accepted. They want to be acclimatized in the new organization. They want to fit in. And therefore, the whole perspective is to say, how do I keep my orientation high so that people know me, I'm creating an impact, I'm settling down well. But in the process, the question is how many are actually building intimate bonds? Very, very few. And therefore, if the denominator is higher than the numerator, simple mathematics, we all know it, what's going to happen to trust. And going back to Vinay's point, I think a lot of this gets ironed out with a very, very simple philosophy that we create rules for people who don't follow. And the ones who don't follow make the exception the rule. And ladies and gentlemen, when the exception becomes the rule, you're in for deep shit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sindhu, let me add something. Yeah, Sahil, it stings also. But coming down to reality, there are, to answer your question, what are organizations doing as of today? I see some progressive organizations are focusing on self. And like we started a small session called a CIO, where there are trends of humility, straight talk, and cooling off kind of a scenario where the leaders were actually handheld for a span of a time. And they said that when you lead calls, these are the structured timelines that you can have calls with. Have straight conversations with people. If this is going to extend hour, at least keep them informed, and speak as slowly as possible. And humility is the only factor that's going to bind you. Don't spend time on anything else, but be as humble, be as slow as possible in your communication, and respect the timelines. Saturday, Sunday, on, off. We created a lot of rules around that. People responded to it, but the only thing that came balanced through was how humble you were and how clearly you communicated with your team. And that's what really bonded the team, rather than speaking slowly, taking advantage of others' time. That made some sense. So the fealty and the loyalty that really mattered are actually going through the old formats, which in any culture it was respected. Even in this, how should I say, Zoom and Google culture is still respected. People work for people who respect them. And that's the bottom line of what's happening today.
So 3 different viewpoints on building trust, but I think I saw a common thread that ran across all your 3 viewpoints, which was being authentic, being consistent, and being articulate, irrespective of whether you're consciously putting in that effort to build in trust. Thank you very much for those diverse viewpoints. We're just going to take a little diversion. I want to share my screen right now. Panelists, you are welcome to participate. There's a small question for the audience. If you can just go to menti.com and put in that code there. As employees return to work, what do they want their leaders or managers to demonstrate? We really like to see your views there. So please go to menti.com. You can use the code that you see on the screen, 86411712. It'll be really interesting. Maybe that's a question next the panelists can actually start debating on. as employees return to work, what do you think they want their managers to demonstrate? Okay, we've got 3 responses: patience, empathy, sensitivity. Any more responses coming? And I'll give you some time. It could be values, it could be qualities, traits, anything else, policy changes. What is it that employees are looking for? Hybrid work model, understanding, guidance, care, motivation, empathy. All right. Values, okay. Flexibility, fun. Okay, panelists, I want you to please note what you have on the screen, because that may be the next question for you. Hybrid, anything else? I'm going to leave it on for another 45 seconds before we go on. Okay, so we see hybrid, care, understanding, and empathy drawing the maximum votes out there. All right, so when I do remember I think I attended one of your talks on a very different panel, where I'm just leaving the screen on as I answer this question, where you largely spoke about employee engagement, and you said one of the caretakers of employee engagement, or the person responsible for employee engagement, is not the HR, but it's actually the immediate supervisor or the manager. And I remember that really resonated a lot with a lot of us when you actually said that it's the immediate supervisor or the manager on an everyday basis who is the custodian of the engagement of employees. Can you elaborate on that? Especially today, how can leaders embrace this along with understanding and care, and ensure that their teammates are engaged?
I think, and which is what people have said in your responses as well. Mostly people have said empathy, flexibility, care, understanding. All of this goes towards saying, treat me well as your employee. Mostly people do not feel treated well by their managers. It could be through harsh words used. It could be through demeaning sarcasm that people, I think corporate world loves sarcasm, right? Through demeaning sarcasm, to making those passing off comments every now and then just to rub it in, right? All that people expect is, and like I said in the beginning as well, treat them as a fellow human being, treat them with respect. You will earn their trust, you will earn their passion, you will have them work 18 hours without complaining. And at the same time, you will also find them responsible. Now, of course, there will still be 10-20% who will misuse your trust. And because of that, you cannot penalize the 80% that are doing a good job. No, if I give him flexibility, sir pe chad ke baith jayega, he will sit on my head. We tend to think in that negative, because that's our upbringing, right? As from our childhood, we have seen our parents also do that with us. Oh, don't praise too much. Even to get your chocolate, you have to work so hard that you feel that, okay, this thing. So all I expect, and there are a lot of HR folks here, start telling your managers to behave like human beings, right? If somebody is unwell, don't tell get well soon, but can you respond to these 5 emails? Stop at get well soon. Do not pick up the phone and call that person again, right? These are small things. So be human, half the things will get sorted.
Great. Thank you, Vinay. I think that actually resonates a lot with what you said and what employees want. We also have one response in the chat box that talks about work-life balance. And I think that's also another dimension of understanding and empathy that you put in. So I'll come over to Sahil. I remember there was this LinkedIn post of yours which said working from home back then was a necessity, as it was safety first, but working from office now needs to be positioned as a USP, as its employees first. Can you elaborate on how this employee first mindset is becoming crucial today?
I think, see, there are two parts to this, Sindhu. When I was writing that post, the thoughts that crossed my mind were multifold, but I'll share two perspectives here today. Perspective number one, we are in an employees market. Okay, and that is the reality. And when you're in an employees market, you have no choice but to bend head over heels to get the best talent on board. The situation would be very, very different had it to be an employer's market. Right? That's the first perspective. The second perspective is, given that it was our need to maintain BCP as a business continuity plan, people embraced it, they continued working, and we didn't know. Let's be very candid, right? 2 years back, we didn't even know what this virus was. We didn't know how it's going to play out. We didn't know wave one, wave two. A lot of us were grappling with this there and then in the moment. And therefore, with the whole situation right now in the way the world is moving across, we don't know what's in store. So I think so the mantra that we've all picked up is agility in the moment. So you decide what makes sense now and you work with it. My fundamental personal belief is to say, if productivity is not getting impacted and an employee is happy working from home, I think that flexibility should be given. If there are performance issues, if there are challenges where an employee finds it difficult to work from home, the infrastructure at work should be made available so that people can do that. And while that infrastructure is being made available, a little bit of relaxation on maybe dress code, on maybe time in, time out, should be given so that people can be incentivized in a so-called non-monetary way to say, okay, whether I work from home or I work from office doesn't matter much. I can wear my jeans, I can wear a t-shirt, and I can walk into office because I know it is just sitting at a different place and working. So I think that flexibility in terms of safety first initially, therefore work from home or work from anywhere. And now, fundamentally, the ability to say wherever people are comfortable, where they can be productive, allow them to work from there. So, Sindhu, I must share this with you and all the viewers who are watching this. Out of scope, but was having a conversation with a couple of youngsters who work at a startup. Okay. And they worked 3 months in 2021 out of Goa. 8,000 rupees a month, all means included per person. And their productivity and their contributions to the startup were amazing. The startup is doing very well and they've really moved up. They said, we wanted the flexibility to be away from our parents. We got it. We wanted to have work-life balance, which is enjoy Goa. We got it. We wanted to work at our schedules, our times. We got it. We went for a couple of beers at the beach. We came back, logged in at midnight and took calls with different geographies across the country. We slept in the morning at 4. We played music. We did whatever we wanted. And it was brilliant. Now, the question is, if I have to be in a metro where my official office is, I won't be able to do so much. Now, the question that we would fundamentally need to ask ourselves is, are we, going back to what I said earlier, are we measuring us or ourselves on rules, policies, and procedures? Or are we measuring ourselves on impact and output? That's the question we need to answer.
Thank you, Sahil. In fact, I actually had that next question to Vinay on the fact that there are a lot of cottages being advertised in hill stations right now, talking about 10,000 rupees a month, and we've got complete 100% Wi-Fi, fantastic food. It was actually as though you read my mind. So thank you, Sahil. And I think it's basically about, like I said earlier, confrontation. The last 2 years have been a revelation to companies, challenging them, challenging the protocols that they had laid. Many a time, people did not even realize what kind of protocols were laid, but they were just followed because it was laid earlier.
Yeah.
It brings me on to the, sorry, you want to add something?
I'm saying yes, sorry.
Okay, great. It brings me on to the next question, Prashil. I saw that your LinkedIn banner said the choices you make reveal what you value. What are the 3 choices organizations should focus on today when it comes to employee productivity?
I mean, surprisingly, we just did some session last week on this. It says, just be clear in your communication, whether it's verbal, written, with employees. And it works the other way around for employees also to respond appropriately. Okay. Have patience and patience in terms of setting timelines of response and giving the benchmarks also. And be as having empathy or being humble is one of the third part of the pillars that one would go by. So it's more focused on yourself, the way you handle your output with people. That's important. And the response eventually is expected to happen. Welsinghow and Brett ran a survey, did a paper in 2021 when they said that people only respond to integrity, people only respond to honesty, and people only respond to patience. Otherwise, they still end up doing what they want to do. So if you want a specific response, don't solve the world, solve one problem at a time. People consume your conversation with their eyes, their ears, and their heart. And if they're doing so, keep it consistent. Okay, keep it honest and keep it consistent. And that's the response that you would get out of it. So did I answer your question, Sindhu, or did I?
To a certain extent, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now let me be humble. What did I miss, Sindhu?
So I wanted you to just tell us, these are the three choices: choice one, choice two, or choice three. I know there's no holy grail, but something that you are following in your organization to say that these are my top three focus areas over the next few months when it comes to productivity.
Okay.
I'll come back to you. There's a tiny announcement. HRAI will be sharing a Google Sheet with all of us. So it's a tiny request from the audience to please fill it and share it back to team@HR Association of India. I'll put in the email ID. I'm going to repeat that. HRAI is going to share a Google Sheet very soon. So request the audience to fill in the details out there and mail it to the email ID that I'm typing in the chat box right now. So next question is common to all the three panelists. We spoke about trust, we spoke about employee engagement, we spoke about productivity, but the biggest elephant in the room is the blurring work hours. So I'm going to leave it open to all the three. It would be great to hear from all the three of you. We saw work hours being blurred. We saw lifestyles being changed. Now, we saw a few people embracing them. We saw a few people complaining about them. Vinay, I want you to, Vinay, Sahil, and Rishi, do tell us about how are you going to manage blurring work hours, or is there a workaround?
You know, the best thing that could happen by getting back to work is that you no longer need to worry about it. You are, not available 24/7, but you're available only at workplace. So I think the advantage of getting back to work is they cannot expect to call up at 10 p.m. and say, can you please get this done? Because they would have seen you in office at 6 o'clock and they would have, so I think a lot of that readjustments will happen. So I think some good things will happen with office resuming, right? One is that the intrusion into private lives will hopefully stop or reduce gradually, and people will start respecting time spent in offices. Like Sahil said, there was a team working out of Goa. Well, the reality is that if you want to work out of Goa for a month, nobody's going to question your intentions. Thanks to the pandemic, people will say, don't worry, go ahead and work out of Goa. We'll give you permission. Or if you want flexibility of working out of your hometown for 2 months because you have something personal to take care of, good news is that nobody will worry about it. They'll, without blinking an eyelid, say, go ahead and do that. So there are a lot of advantages that people can, and which is what I call flexibility or hybrid mode, because, you get to choose hybrid when you want to, and otherwise you're in the brick and mortar space. So that's how it will work. So I think blurring of lines or not blurring of lines, it is good that people will get back because it will help them disconnect and not stay constantly connected.
Great. Thank you, Vinay. Prashil, Sahil, who wants to go next?
Sahil, please.
I think, personally speaking, I see very limited correlation between the pandemic and the blurring. Think of it this way. Anyway, most of us would spend 8 to 10 hours in office, 2 to 4 hours traveling. And within those 2 to 4 hours, also, majority of us would be on calls, either while driving or whether we were driven. Yes, there were certain exceptions of people who would travel by train and they wouldn't be able to take calls because it would be a noisy environment. But the rest of us were always on calls. So I think the number of hours has been hyped up to way too much extent. And it's been added because in the number of hours, we've been doing multiple things, which is something that as much that we may want to deny, the fact of the matter is people have been doing household chores during office hours, which otherwise, if you're sitting in office, very few people would do. At best, people would shop while sitting in office online. At best, people would pay their credit cards, their personal credit cards, or their electricity bills, or those kind of stuff. But here, people are actually mopping the floor. People are doing the utensils. People are doing so many other things sitting at home during office hours between calls, because that's the best time to do it. And therefore, aggregating that issue to say, you know what, I've been working 16 hours. I think hand on heart, let's be honest, have we really been doing it? For a minute, let's accept that people were doing it. My fundamental question to all these people is, it is a choice. It's a choice. And therefore, why are we hyping it up so much? If I work 18 hours, that doesn't mean I need to expect my team to work 18 hours. If there is a project that is time bound, either I as a leader need to take the call to say, you know what, these timelines are unrealistic. And therefore, let's push back. And if they are realistic timelines, then maybe I need to prioritize and plan well to deliver. But working 16 hours of blurring these boundaries and doing it consistently, learning to potential burnout, then we need to fundamentally ask ourselves, saying, as a particular organization or as a particular industry or as India Inc., what are we chasing? And what are we chasing at what cost? Because at the end of the day, you'll get a promotion, you'll get a great rating, but if you don't have the health, and then I say, you know what, we have yoga sessions, please attend those. Like, how stupid is that? You're creating a problem and then you're giving me a solution to solve the problem that never existed in the first place. My question is, how many of us have the courage to pick up the phone and say, why does this have to happen at 11 p.m. at night? Why can't this happen tomorrow? And I'm not being provocative here, but all I'm simply trying to say is, with all professional decency, with all respect, we need to ask these questions.
No, in fact, I would go the other way around, Sahil. Sorry to sort of just interrupt, but
Sure.
I think we have never been thought to be rebellious, right? We've been thought to be submissive and follow rules. You know, whatever.
Sorry, Vinay, I'm not even saying be rebellious. I may sound rebellious.
No, but I'm saying as HR community, if there's any training or if there's any intervention that they can plan, it should be to plan an intervention saying, is everything required at 11 p.m. and get that done to their first level managers, to the top management, and see if there is a change that can happen.
Vinay, let me ask this question further. How many of us send our people on training and then tell them, sorry, but this is urgent. Can you please take care of this and step out of that training? Like, seriously?
Most of
Where
us,
are we even doing justice today? Can training be at the cost of daily work? Answer is no. But do they have to be certain days in a year where I clearly say, if someone decides to go for training, I know the guy is going for training 3 weeks later, I will plan for it. And if a contingency comes up, I will plan for the contingency. But under no way am I going to pull the person out of a training, because it's going to be a lose-lose situation. Uska dhyan maa bhi nahi hai, uska dhyan yahan bhi nahi hai.
People say, oh, training, acha, chutti pe ja rahe ho.
Yeah.
I think the crux of the matter, Sahil and Vinay, is don't say yes when you want to say no. how many of us are actually assertive enough, like you said, courageous enough, assertive enough to say this can wait till 8 a.m. Because I think it's as a culture of many organizations, people and organizations are implicitly told to say yes. The client needs it, the deadline is there, the client needs it, it's urgent, you will have to do it. How many people actually stand up and say yes, it can wait?
I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but I'm really
People.
passionate about this point. I think fundamentally, it's not to do with courageous or being assertive.
Yeah.
It has got to do with the fact, and see, it's very easy for us to come on the Zoom call and talk all these things, right? But fundamentally, saying no comes at a cost. And who is willing to take that cost? Because the way it's not that I'm worried about saying no. I can say no, you can say no, Vinay can say no, Prashil can say no, Faisal can also say no. But the moment Faisal says no, what are going to be the implications of that? And then the question that we need to answer is it worth it? And then going back to Vinay's example of the water, jab pani yahan tak aa jata hai, then we say, you know what, mental health, I am getting mind, and I'm not going to complete the word, but we all know, right? And then I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to push back. And then going back to Vinay's point, we all become rebels. The question is, why wait till that level, till you're pushed to the wall? Take baby steps.
Great discussion. Lovely points emerging out there. I'd also like to listen to Prashil on the blurring work hours.
With respect to what Sahil said and Vinay said, that's the road I kind of have been through. When I say that's the road I've been through, honestly speaking, most of the employees would rather resign from the company and start looking out for jobs and do moonlighting rather than say a no to it.
Prashil, that's a very good point, but the question is why?
That's
why
right.
would they find it easier to resign? I'm sure you're going to cover it, but I think that's going to be paramount.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming to. Most of them would do that. Half of them would do that primarily because somebody else is also doing it. And the other half would say, what the hell, I'm getting better money. I guess one of the most guillotined role in the organization today, and I wouldn't say guillotine, but the most stressful role in the organization today is that of a manager. The poor guy needs to answer to the customer, needs to answer to the employee, needs to answer to his manager, needs to answer to his child at home, his grandmother at home, as well as his wife at home. And it's quite a jigsaw puzzle that he needs to do it. We tried the method of and that's the place where we started focusing on self. And then there's another act that we did is we started doing resource management and valuing and weighing the job. ये कितने किलो का जॉब है भाई, आपको अगर 4 दिन में चाहिए तो ये कितने किलो का जॉब है और कितने लोग चाहिए. Have a communication. So we kind of created a review board after every project comes in or every movement comes in. Let's have the balance. Let's have internal mechanisms of how many people, what are the benchmarks of us forecasting or delivering this job with how many team and how many people. And what we did was we reviewed that, got the weight of the job in place, and the other part we put up annual increases that would happen. We closed it down to the project closure. You do this job within 4 days with 4 people, or you do this job within 5 days with 5 people. This is the budget that you have. If you want to get it done, do it willingly. Do it with your heart. Don't do it because somebody else is telling you. And if somebody else is telling you and you want to do it, have a concurrence on the same page. And you measure it out in the first 1 month. What is the kind of challenges you're facing? Do you need 5 more people, 6 more people, 1 more person, or you don't need any other person in place? Get it done. Wait. So structuring the organization a bit, by customers. The validity and the validity of the customers is the first phase that one would go through. Getting the weighing of the job in terms of not generally number of people that you need, but also the amount of incentive that you would need to share it, and break it down on project wise, break it down on month wise. Okay, you need it, you take it, you move on. Okay, and you decide as a team, and the project manager decides, and who wants to do it. At the end of the day, it's the willingness of the person to contribute. It's not the manager getting work out of the person. This model is kind of working. This model is kind of settling down as long as the employee is willingly giving through it. I can speak about humility, being humble, and doing a lot of other things, but some of the base level loyalty and fidelity issues are money. Other one is whether I really want to do it and what's out in the market. I don't think so. My attrition has reduced a bit, but it has balanced. But by doing a method like this, I'm surely having a lot of attraction coming in. I mean, what my recruitment team would work at 62%, now they're kind of working at 52%. Now they're working at 69%. It's good. It's balancing. It's settling down. The decision-making authority is of the employee and the team, small units. And the idea actually came through when in Panchatantra we used to have, or why go far, in Chanakya's theory, we generally had a simple part. Each village is run by a village pramukh, and there are guys around it who are willing to do it. And each one had a part in terms of democracy, whether you need to balance this work or no, and how much they want to do it for the customer. And that's exactly the way we work. We moved out external forces, let each team perform individually, have advisors through the team. That's the balancing fact as of today that is happening. So the evolution has been by telling, now we are listening. That's the phase what we're.
Thank you, Prashil. Thank you. That was very objective when you told about a method on how we could manage that. So before we wrap up the panel discussion, I think Faisal has a poll to be run. The link to the Google Sheet has also been shared by Peter in the chat box. If everyone could kindly click on fill on that. I'm handing it over to you, Faisal.
So before we move to the Q&A session, we would be running a poll. Request all our participants to kindly share your feedback. Also, during this time, request all participants to please ask questions to our panel members. So I believe there are no questions. Thank you, Sindhu. Thank you, dear panel members, Mr. Prashil, Mr. Sahil, and Mr. Vinay, for sharing your insights. To all those who wish to share and learn, you can also access the recording of our today's session on our YouTube link shared in the chat window. Before we conclude with today's session, we would also want to thank all the associations, Asia, NASCOM, COE, Talgro, TLE, LinkedIn, Local Ahmedabad, and India for supporting HRAI's event. To know more about this association, request you all to kindly visit the link provided in the chat window. Do join us for our next Connecting the Dots session on the topic Understanding and Developing Organizational Culture on the 10th of March 2022 at 3 p.m. IST. Request you all to kindly register for this event at the link mentioned in the chat window. See you soon. Stay safe. Take care and bye for now.
Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Sahil. Thank you, Prashil. Thank you, Vinay. I think we had a fantastic discussion on values, engagement, culture, productivity, blurring work hours, what's driving us, what's not driving us. I'm sure something tells me there's going to be a part 2 for this panel discussion. So do stay tuned. Thank you very much and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.